Good evening. If you've just joined us, this is ANN7 Prime and my name is Cindy Mabi. Now, 24 torturous years later, prominent South African singer and former ANC MP Jennifer Ferguson speaks out about her rape ordeal. Inspired by a social media campaign encouraging women to share their experiences of sexual assault, the rape survivor finally came forward. In a Facebook post and blog entry, she narrated how she was painfully raped by a senior sports administrator and also a former ANC MP. The assault happened after a performance she had given at a sports dinner. The survivor has named the alleged rapist, but since there is no charge and the accused has not pleaded, ANN7 is not revealing his identity. And Ferguson, who does not plan to lay charges against the assaulter, says she was overwhelmed by the support for her following the revelation. And speaking to Daily Maverick, she says, and I quote, "This morning when I woke up and after my kids had left for school, it was like there was no choice. I had to do this. There's something fundamental in the rape survivor's story. Her testimony, it's always questioned. And that can happen right after the attack. That's what stops the reporting. And it's been so moving for me that I'm heard and that I'm believed. If my silence has in any way been colluding in a cover-up, then I'm really sorry about that. If other women do come forward, that could change things." Siabulela Gentile, Not In My Name, CEO, joins us in studio. And we have Shahida Omar from the Teddy Bear Clinic as a clinical director there. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Omar, just looking at the reaction, of course, on social media, there still seems to be a level of suspicion whenever a rape survivor speaks out. And this perpetuates, the paradigm that essentially rapists or the sexual assaulters can get away with it.
Well, indeed, I think there's always that element of false allegation and the questioning of the motive. And in this particular event or instance, the fact that it is disclosed long after the actual incident occurred, there is that element of doubt and questioning what is the motivation now. So, and I think there's often the issue of stigma as well, but just in terms of the Me Too, the hashtag Me Too, and the encouragement and promoting people to come out of the closet and ensure that people are given an opportunity and a platform to share this kind of trauma is actually a very positive move. So I think there's already a paradigm shift, as you've alluded to earlier, that people are given permission, that it's okay to talk about it. And it's also an opportunity for closure, to get to tell their story and get some closure and enable the journey to healing. Because by not disclosing and suppressing it is certainly something that I think creates the wound to fester, and it becomes very toxic within the physical system and the psychological well-being of the victim.
But looking at this case where the accused hasn't responded and we're not entirely sure whether Jennifer Ferguson will lay any charges, how then is there that closure, the healing and reconciliation?
Well, I think for the victim, the fact that she's actually brought it out into the open, this, physical wounds heal, invisible, and the emotional scars remain invisible. So she's been sitting and struggling with the emotional scar, looking at it every time, and it's a constant reminder. And probably at the time when she was a victim of rape, of course, she was powerless, helpless, and there was a sense of hopelessness for her then. But by actually speaking out, she's actually now in a position where she's reclaiming her power and control to say, I'm in charge. I was not in control when this happened, but I'm certainly in control of how I'm going to move forward. And she's taken this control by telling and sharing her story to the rest of the world. So regardless of the fact of whether the...
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Regardless of the fact whether the accused is actually...
I do apologize. We do have a delay, Dr. Omar. Please stay on the line. We have Mr. Siabulela Gentile, not in my name, SA CEO. I mean, it had to take social media to liberate rape victims who would have otherwise been condemned, shamed, and possibly even blamed for what had occurred to them. In your view, how then do we best manage, and especially when it comes to dealing with the issue of sexual assault?
I think it is important that we allow the law to take its course, first of all, and we need to encourage the victims to take that stand to say they need to go to the police station and open cases against these perpetrators. But we are aware that it's not easy, and some of them might have been threatened in the past. With the story of Jennifer, it happened a long time ago. We really don't know her reasons why and why she decided to come out now because of the hashtag. And we need to really say that the hashtag #MeToo has done a great job, as opposed to it has done more good than the Men Are Trash hashtag. And of course, we have seen men also coming out saying hashtag I will. I don't know if you've seen that one as a response to the other hashtag. But I always say that these hashtags can only go so far unless we as men can take corrective actions towards our stories. We need to have these conversations amongst ourselves to say, guys, this is wrong. What we are doing is wrong. And I'm glad that a lot of women are coming out to speak up and share their stories and highlight their stories as victims.
And Debbie Howers is a clinical psychologist joining us on the phone line. Good evening to you, Debbie. I mean, if you just look at the reaction on social media, of course, there is a mixed emotions where some are saying that there had been false allegations made previously with regards to rape claims or allegations, and that, the motive is being questioned in terms of the timing, etc. But just in having a psychological trauma of this nature, unless you walk in somebody's footsteps, we don't entirely understand what motivates their behavior. So if you were to maybe give us a sense as to why it would take somebody so long to come out, and secondly, why in most cases women don't report these crimes?
Yes, it is a very common thing, which is contrary to conscious kind of understanding of it. You would wonder why they aren't more forthcoming. But often when you look at it on a deeper level, they often always see outer authorities sometimes as heroes or somebody that you look up to. Especially as a child, we're taught to look up to people that are in places of power. So often they get confused as to whether they're right or wrong. And often if there's threats of speaking, it will also make them frightened to speak, for fear of repercussions or threats that they're given. And often it's to do with stigmas, where they often might even believe that they are the cause of it, where they believe it might be their fault. So that kind of guilt also will make them withdraw and retreat. Also, sometimes if they do believe that the perpetrator is somebody that's an authority that they look up to, then they will often be afraid of losing something, whether it's some kind of value that they're gaining from that person. And often it's that fear of not being believed as well, because often a lot of times as a child, their needs, their feelings or what's happened to them are disregarded. So it's a combination of a lot of that which reflects the self-concept of an individual, which does get broken down quite a lot. Also that fear of being blamed or that they're wrong. So a lot of times on the unconscious level, it's these fears which makes them retreat, and often they believe they might not even have impact if they do come forth, where solutions won't emerge. So it's that powerlessness, helplessness, guilt and fears which startles an individual from being forthcoming into the open. Yeah.
And Dr. Omar, in terms of the punitive measures being taken, especially in this case, a very prolific individual in the soccer administration, we can, give credentials around the World Cup as the leader of the then organizing committee, and no response from that. And I want to get to the point of if there is no atonement from the alleged perpetrator, what does that do to the victim, albeit that, she's gotten this off her chest and shared it with the world?
Well, I think certainly, as I mentioned, the issue of the dynamic of power and control, she's now got it off her chest. And I think there's always that flicker of hope that something will happen and some process or due processes will follow. So the fact that she's brought it out into the open, and if nothing in terms of the legislation is followed through, there might be some, I would say, level of regret or disappointment, more disappointment, but it's not something that she hasn't worked with through the years, because she's had 24 years, and for whatever reason she didn't make a disclosure in the past 24 years, but the fact that it's propelled her now, and the hashtag #MeToo has given impetus, it's released her, there's a sense of relief and this burden being lifted off her shoulders. So she probably feels liberated, and she feels she's now able to move on to her in her life. But I think I want to pick up on what Debbie said and why victims do not disclose. I mean, this is a classical case of the rape accommodation syndrome, where the dynamic of secrecy, we looked at often, why don't victims tell? Because it's the whole issue around that their disclosure would be discredited, they would be brought into disrepute, the stigma, the shame, the whole blame game name, but also the fact that even after victims often tell somebody and it's dismissed to say, but that's a powerful figure, an authoritarian or a very respectful figure. Do you realize what you're getting yourself into? And that's one of the reasons that victims then recant from their initial disclosure and continue or collude with this dynamic of secrecy. Because we need to appreciate that disclosure doesn't always happen immediately, directly, or purposefully. It may happen accidentally and indirectly. But in this case, it's taken a journey of 24 years to process and to move on. And of course, the trigger in this situation is probably the hashtag #MeToo, where now there's a collective and joint and collaborative effort in reaching out to all victims to actually speak out and break the silence, which is absolutely brilliant. Like my learned colleague, the CEO from hashtag #NotInMyName alluded to. I think, this is such a brilliant move. It is so wonderful that people can actually now feel comfortable that there's a platform there to release and relieve them of this burden that they've been holding on to and been suppressing and repressing and blocking out for so many years.
All right, so we take a caller, Rafik in Johannesburg. Good evening to you, and thanks for calling. What's your comment or question?
You and your panel, peace be upon you all. I'm going to come at mine are two comments. One is, I think the government must take responsibility of this. The sort of folks that they've put onto television since democracy that contributes to this terrible abuse of women. And if this can perhaps help you as a political activist that was terribly tortured in prison, I found my comfort by forgiving my tormentors conditionally, and later on in democracy, we were still grieving on the death of my wife, and my son that I loved and educated was brutally murdered. And I found that if I conditionally forgive the murderers of my son, then I can still pursue the path of philanthropy and relief and rehabilitation. So to your guest, please, if you can find the courage to forgive conditionally, then you will heal. And thank you very much for having me on your program.
Thank you so much for sharing, Rafik. I really appreciate it, and my condolences, for the loss of your family, but also taking a step further to say now the onus is on the survivor to forgive, which is something that is easier said than done. Mr. Gentile, and you touched on something of taking it beyond the social media realm. Can a class action be taken, for example, because we haven't heard of any reaction from the alleged perpetrator?
Yes, honestly, Cindy, even ourselves as the movement, we are still looking into the issue to say what opportunities are available to us, because you know that we are dealing with a very prominent individual here, so we cannot just jump into a case without full knowledge of. But yes, it is important to take these hashtags beyond Twitter or Facebook and social media. And what we do with Not In My Name SA is that we are creating these platforms where men especially, but also women, but most of the time it's men, can talk about men issues with men. Because as I said earlier, it's important that we as men, it starts with us, because I always say that women do not rape themselves, they do not abuse themselves, they don't do all these things to themselves. So it is up to us as men to say, let us sit around the programs that we are doing. We even go to the shebeens and the taverns and talk to them, you know, because I believe that these are the spaces where you find men lying to each other, you know, and there's a language that we use that perpetuates this kind of incidences. But it is important that we come out strongly to condemn gender-based violence, rape culture, and femicide as men and women, and to take our campaigns out of social media, and then I think in that way we will be more proactive and more productive in a way as a society. And
but it seems there's a sense of helplessness and almost like a permanent state of panic and fear, you know, having to look over your shoulder as a woman in terms of what you wear and the company that you keep, and when you might be the next victim. And
you are right, I agree with you. But on the brighter side of it is that the paradigm is shifting now. There's a change of things. More women are coming out to speak, and the law enforcement agencies are also coming into the game. We've seen with the case of Sipho Ndlovu, we have seen the way the MEC has dealt with the issue. Yes, Orlando at Ibixulu. So each and every day we are becoming more intolerant to the issues of rape and femicide, and people are coming out to be more vocal than they were before. So we are hoping that all these platforms that we are creating will send a very strong message out there to the people to say that not anymore, we can no longer continue living the way we are living. And as much as though it might seem that we are hopeless, it is a battle that we are prepared to fight as the movement, and with all the stakeholders that we are involved with. We are doing everything. We are working around the clock to partner with all the relevant people to make sure that these victims are protected, not only themselves, but also their children and their families.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we had Kenny and Katlehong. I'm sorry that you had to wait so long, but we'll continue taking your calls. Debbie, I just want to talk about the rebuttal, or maybe, you know, in terms of when you put your story on social media, all sorts of reaction can come your way, that you need to be prepared of a possible scrutiny or even further criticism, albeit that people don't know the full details, but we're very quick to react and share our bit. So for survivors, when you do come out, there's also, you know, you need to be prepared to a certain level that you may get further criticism.
Yes, that is true, because a lot of people do project judgment and without, as you say, having understood exactly and walked in their shoes and understand where they're coming from. So that is a normal thing to expect. And often we find that even in our families, where sometimes our parents don't have the time to actually listen and respond and ask questions and understand the perspective from where the individual is coming from. So also based on what they've previously been exposed to when they have disclosed will also determine the extent to which they feel comfortable with coming forward. And social media, does have such a lot of those kind of trolls and cyberbullying and everything, and so they do take that risk. But as I see, the consciousness now is shifting to more understanding of victims now of that rape, which is a very positive thing. And I think it encourages people a lot more to be forthcoming and to now believe in solutions a lot more than before, because a lot of those illusions are being shattered now, where we've always looked up to people in places of authority like priests, teachers, parents, in car guards, etc., etc. So it just gives them a lot of that more impetus to come forward and trusting that support.
Debbie House, a clinical psychologist, joining us on the phone line. Thank you so much. Dr. Omar, just very lastly, in looking at the social psyche and whether we have a national strategy that gives you a sense of comfort or a safety net that says, you know, the judicial system and the forensics, all of that, the system is in place to ensure that perpetrators are brought to book, number one. And secondly, that we have a healthy protected environment, except you need to be vigilant of certain things? Or are we really the world's capital when it comes to rape, murder, and all other heinous crimes?
So, Cindy, the answer to your first question, I think if we just go back 10 years, not even longer than 10 years, 10 years ago, this would not have been possible. This would not have been conceived or believed to happen. And today we are finding people are actually talking about it because there are platforms, there are structures, there are supportive measures that are in place. And if we just look at government departments, next week the Deputy Minister of Justice has organized a sexual offences dialogue, bringing all stakeholders to revisit the Sexual Offences Act and to make meaningful and valuable contributions. And if you look at the Department of Education, the stance they've adopted now, and they've acknowledged and conceded that many errors have been made, and moving forward, addressing the very challenges that have created problems within the school system, the gender-based violence issues that we are currently faced with. But if you also look at civil society, the resources that are available were not available in the past. So a lot of therapeutic facilities and services are being provided to victims and their families. And then if we look at the National Prosecutions Authorities, where more cases are now put on the roll, and there's a higher conviction rate compared to 10 years ago. But then even the Department of Justice, where they're fast-tracking these cases and sexual offences cases are being finalized. So I think there's definitely a positive move as far as gender-based violence issues are concerned. I don't say or agree that we are there. And yes, we are one of the 10th most violent nations in the world. But I think once again, one needs to consider that there are a lot of other, if we're looking at proactive and preventative measures, a lot of civil society, faith-based organizations, government structures are now addressing this, where there are many mainstreams being developed to address and strategize against the violence, around violence against women and children. So I think there has been a huge positive movement in the direction of eradicating and addressing the scourge of sexual violence against women and children.
Dr. Omar, we're going to have to leave it there. Shahida Omar from the Teddy Bear Clinic. She's the clinical director. And in studio, we have Mr. Gentile from Not In My Name SA. You were talking about collaboration, or at least Dr. Omar mentioned that the civic organizations and more active citizenry is something that we can utilize as a resource in dealing with matters of security and safety. Yes. How much support do you have for those that want to use your services?
I will tell you, and I'll be honest with you, Cindy, and I'm speaking for the organization that I work for, Not In My Name SA, and a few others that I know. The resources, we are told that the resources are there, but only to find out that it's long processes. So what I do normally is that I call on to all South Africans to do just as we did. We just decided to stand up and do something, and took to the streets and marched and formed a movement such as this one, without any help of anyone, without the government, without any donors, without anything. And it's still like that even now, but we still wake up each and every day to do what we do. We take back cases to court, we picket, we highlight stories of victims and perpetrators, We travel all around the country and no one is funding all these things. We are doing it from the goodness of our own hearts. So we're calling on all South Africans to say that this issue affects all of us, and it is important that as South Africans we must do something and be active citizens. We don't need money per se, we need resources, we need skills, we need people who can be able to assist us with legal matters, with medicine, with all these other things. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that as more women are coming out, it is a good thing, and as a movement we'd like to invite them to say, you know what guys, come to us, speak to us. As little resourced as we are, we will definitely try and do something, because we believe that the process of healing only begins when you speak out, and when of course the perpetrator has been able to say their side of the story. But over and above, we are calling on everyone to come through and assist us, all civil organizations, government entities, private companies, entrepreneurs, and even individuals such as me and you to come on board and assist.
All right, and that hashtag is hashtag not in my name SA, and we're speaking to the CEO, Mr. Siyabulela Gentile, and of course hashtag Me Too continues encouraging more women to come out and share their stories of their sexual ordeal. We'll take a quick break. We'll see you shortly.